Thanks very much, and it's a pleasure to be here, even if it has to be virtually at your 175th annual general meeting. So as has been said, I was appointed to the role of Cabinet Secretary for Education 3 weeks ago. It has certainly been a busy 3 weeks, that's for sure, but I've been once again just blown away by the sheer dedication of the education workforce and the exceptional efforts that continue to be made across our education sector to support learners. Of course, as a mother of 2 school-aged children, one at primary school and one at secondary school, I have witnessed firsthand the challenges of the past 15 months have placed on teachers, certainly in my locality, and also how they have risen to the occasion and really supported our young people. Our education system, I don't need to tell you, is reliant on the hard work and dedication of teachers, and I really do recognise, both from a personal and a professional point of view, the immense contribution and support that you have made to ensuring all our children and young people have continued to receive their education, albeit in very, very different settings and surroundings. It's clear once again to me that professionalism of our teachers and head teachers and the interaction between you and our children and young people is one of the key strengths of our education system. And I would also like to pay tribute from the outset to the hard work and the commitment of all the children and young people and to their fantastic efforts over very difficult times. And I want to thank all of you here and your colleagues in schools right across the country and the EIS as an institution for the hard work and your continued dedication and commitment to all children, for your support in helping them achieve their full potential during these difficult times. The pandemic has raised challenges for all of us, but I can assure you in the education workforce these challenges have not gone unnoticed. Since the start of the pandemic, health and well-being has been raised more and more, and quite rightly so. Many people have suffered anxiety at work and at home due to our normal lives being so severely disrupted, and very much the fear of the unknown. And teachers and the wider school staff are no exception to this, and I recognise that the last 15 months have been in no way easy. Working with our partners, we've put in place new resources specifically on mental health, but also on coaching and mentoring, whilst also introducing a new programme of professional learning for recently qualified teachers. Over 4,200 teachers have benefited from that support to date, and we're working with partners to consider how a similar package can be put in place in advance of the new school year. Since the start of the pandemic, we've provided over 200 million as part of a £400 million commitment over 2021 and 21-22 to support education recovery. And that includes support to local authorities for recruitment of more teachers. Those teachers will intensify support for individuals or groups of pupils who have significant gaps in their progress as a result of lockdown. In the first 100 days of this parliamentary term, I'll also provide additional funding to local authorities to increase teacher numbers by 1,000 and classroom assistants by 500. That's part of our commitment to support the recruitment of 3,500 additional teachers and classroom assistants over the parliamentary term, and it is over and above the 1,400 teachers that were recruited during the pandemic. However, I acknowledge that there are a significant number of teachers currently working on temporary contracts, and I will encourage local authorities to employ more teachers in permanent contracts going forward. We have also committed to reducing the teacher class contact time by 1.5 hours to free up teachers to prepare lessons and improve their skills. I recognise that workload is a main factor in teacher stress, so reducing class contact time by 1.5 hours will create over 2,000 permanent teaching posts and reduce workload. It is for that reason that I want to deliver on this commitment as soon as possible. Following the cancellation of the exams again this year, I'm particularly conscious of the additional work teachers are undertaking in the delivering the alternative certification model this year. I am enormously grateful for the efforts of teachers and lecturers and others in our schools and colleges who are implementing the model to ensure the fairness for all learners. The model has been developed as part of a co-production approach through the National Qualifications 2021 group that has representation from education stakeholders, including the EIS, parents and learners. The support and the input from the AIS has been absolutely invaluable in arriving at the flexible model that I firmly believe to be the fairest for our young people in the challenging circumstances due to the pandemic. I've been reassured by the HMIE report on how well the model is being implemented locally. In particular, that local authority officers, head teachers, SQA coordinators and teachers themselves have collaborated to ensure that the efforts of young people are appropriately recognised, and that local authorities have supported schools to implement the model to reflect their own context whilst working within a national framework. In acknowledgement of the additional workload, we are making provision for an exceptional one-off £400 pro rata payment for all teachers and lecturers involved in the assessment of the National 5 Higher and Advanced Higher courses. Officials have been engaging with COSLA and other partners on the arrangements for this payment, which we expect to be finalised very soon. In addition to assessment support days, were also agreed for the purposes of supporting the delivery of the alternative certification model, and I understand that many schools have already made use of these or will be doing so this week. While my immediate focus absolutely remains on ensuring that we do right by all learners taking national qualifications this year, in my statement to Parliament on the 3rd of June, I also announced that I will seek to reform our key national agencies, the SQA and Education Scotland. This will include looking at their role, the remit and purpose of the organisations, as well as considering their function and governance arrangements. This will be a key priority and will be informed by the findings of the OECD review that's due to be published on the 21st of June. As part of our reform agenda, we will also be devolving even greater powers to schools while intensifying the discussion around school-based decision-making. I know that you have supported this work in the past, and I look forward to discussing the next steps in more detail with the EIS and teachers right across Scotland. And I would like to make it clear that reform will not mean extra pressure or work for you at this critical time as we look to recovery. I do, however, want to look at options that will ensure schools get the best possible support, enabling them to do the very best for the children in their care. So teachers must be able to focus relentlessly on providing the highest quality of learning and teaching for our children. Now, I know that many of you will be frustrated that agreement on an SNCT pay deal has not been reached, and for that we must apologise that that's been delayed. I do, however, now want to see pace and progress on reaching a fair deal for teachers, and we will play our part in those negotiations. The last pay deal saw teachers' pay increase by 13%. Outside of London, teachers' starting pay is now the highest in the UK, and I want to ensure that teaching remains an attractive graduate profession. Now, teachers are at the core of Scottish society and help to define what our future might look like. And we're really blessed with a profession that is highly committed and skilled, and I want that to continue. I also want to ensure that Scotland's education workforce at all levels reflects the diversity of the community it serves, to enrich the educational experience for the whole school population and to more accurately reflect Scotland's increasingly diverse population. A more diverse education workforce brings benefits for everyone, regardless of the demographics of the community in which that school is sited. So looking specifically at race, we know that the number of black and minority ethnic teachers in Scotland schools is woefully low, with fewer than 2% of teachers identifying as being from a black or minority ethnic background. We also know that there are barriers from the outset, from the low numbers of minority ethnic students undertaking initial teacher education, through to qualified teachers with years of experience unable to access senior leadership positions. These issues were considered by Professor Ruina Ashrad in her report published in March, and she made a number of recommendations to address them, which are now being taken forward by the Scottish Government's Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education programme. The EIS is represented on the programme's stakeholder network group and will be instrumental in that implementation. So in closing, I want you to have the time to lead, to plan your working lives and to reflect on your own professional learning needs. I want you to enjoy your jobs, and I want teaching to be seen as an attractive and rewarding career choice. So I want to reassure you that I will do what I can to lessen workload and minimise stress for the benefit of all. As the challenges of the pandemic continue, we know there is more to do, much more to do. In the short term, we must continue to manage the risks of COVID as we hopefully move towards a greater sense of normality in the new academic year. But I really look forward to working with you all to ensure we face those challenges together and we continue to deliver a high quality education system that ensures all our children and young people can achieve their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. That was a very interesting and quite positive speech, and we also look forward to working with you in your role, so that you've happily agreed to answer some questions from us today. So we've had quite a large number of questions from our delegates, so with your permission, we'll take some just now, and then we'll send forward the rest of them to your office for you. That's okay? Yeah. That's grand. So rather than not wasting time, but taking time getting people in and out, we've collated the questions and I'm going to read them out. So I'll take two questions and then I'll take another two together. So I'll read the two questions out and then I'll let you come in and answer those two. Okay, so the first question on class size reduction was raised by both Nicola Fisher and Katie McCabe. 20 years ago this year, the SNP made a manifesto promise to reduce class size maxima to 18. Given that you've been in power, not you personally, since 2007, and that such a reduction would undoubtedly have raised attainment and improved the life chances of our children and young people and increased the safety of school staff and pupils during the pandemic, when can we expect this commitment to be fulfilled? And then I'll take a second question from Nusat Uthmani. What will the Cabinet Secretary do at government level to ensure all teachers currently out of work are given a permanent job? And how will she end the disgrace of the 1 in 10 Scottish teachers being on temporary contracts? So I'll let you come back in on that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So on the second question, I touched on this in my opening remarks, and it's something I'm very keen to look at very carefully. The Scottish Government has put investment in through the pandemic to increase the number of teachers and classroom assistants, and as I said, we're continuing to increase that number as we move forward with the manifesto commitment that we've made. Given that we are still going through the pandemic and then we have to recover from the pandemic, I very much see that we will need every education resource that we have, every teaching resource that we have available to be able to assist our children and young people as we move through this process. And also, we of course have the manifesto commitment about reducing teacher contact time as well. On that basis, I really do want local authorities, who are, of course, the employers of teachers, to be encouraging permanent contracts. The funding is going in from the Scottish Government. There is clearly a need for teachers at this point and into the future. And it's one of the aspects I will be working on very carefully to encourage local authorities to move to that permanent contracts position when we are seeing the increase in teacher numbers that the Scottish Government is moving forward with. So that's certainly something which I know is important to teachers and is very important to me as I look at this as well. As I say, we need the teaching profession at this point and every teacher to be available in the classroom, and that's what I want to be able to see. When it comes to class sizes, we have seen changes to class sizes as we've went on. So we are seeing a reduction in class sizes. We are determined to look very carefully at what can be done with this. And I think it's a discussion that we would very much like to have with the EIS and with other unions. I know this is something which you've been discussing at your AGM around class contact time and class sizes, and I recognise that the campaign that you have been working on and calling on politicians to listen, I know it's something that will, I'm sure, be on the agenda when I'm meeting with the EIS delegations, as I do for my one-to-one meetings, to see how you think that can be progressed. So we have made progress. But I do recognise that the EIS does have that campaign see further progress on it, and I'm sure that's something that I'll be picking up with them.
Thank you for that. Okay, the next question relates to the SQA, and it was raised by Colin Gardner and Adam Sutcliffe. The SQA has been found wanting during the pandemic and indeed long before that. What guarantees can you give that the voice of the teaching profession, in particular the EIS, will be listened to and acted upon when reviewing the role of this organisation in Scottish education? And can you assure us that the review of the SQA and Education Scotland will, one, be led by someone entirely independent of the SQA, Education Scotland and the Scottish Government, and two, take into account extensive teacher, pupil and parent feedback from different socio-economic and cultural contexts across Scotland. Three, look outwards to countries such as Finland so that we can learn what it will take to get back to being one of the best education systems in Europe and in the world. And I'm going to add a question from Maria Devoy on the ACM. Pupils were assured by the SQA that this year no algorithm will be applied to their grades. And more recently, you told them if your teacher thinks you deserve an A, you will get an A. But if a teacher is instructed by their local authority to apply an algorithm and raise grade boundaries, thereby downgrading their pupils' results, what should the teachers do?
Right, okay, two big questions there. I'll try and be detailed as possible, but not take up all the time just with two questions. So, absolutely on the aspects around the reform of SQA and Education Scotland, I'm really, really keen that we look at this properly. This is not a piecemeal piece of reform. This is not a round the edges piece of reform. We absolutely need to get this right. And I'm determined to make sure that we do that in a way where we've got teachers' voices, parents' voices, and very importantly as well, young people's voices in this. I think one of the good things that we can take from what we've been doing in the pandemic is actually how we've worked collaboratively with stakeholders as we've went through education recovery, through the education recovery group. And I want to keep that collegiate way of working going forward as much as possible. I'm really wanting to get into a space where we can start talking about what the solutions are and what the outcomes we want for young people and what agencies we need to deliver those for young people. And absolutely teachers will have a voice in that, so can be absolutely reassured of that. The OECD report, as I mentioned, is coming out on the 21st of June, so that's already doing a lot of work about looking at the wider global picture on this, so absolutely be reassured that that's getting taken forward. And I'll be making more announcements about the setup of the review when I make a further statement to Parliament on the 22nd of June, just after the SQA, just after the OECD report comes out. But the teachers will play a key role in this, and absolutely I'm sure the EIS will as part of that. When it comes to the alternative certificate model and algorithms, there's a great deal of concern around this, I know, and that was because mistakes were made last year in the use of algorithms at the SQA. So this year there is no interference from the SQA or Education Scotland when you're looking at what grade goes into the SQA. So whatever the school puts in for a pupil, that will stay that pupil's grade. There's no algorithm. There is a quality assurance process at a local level, where at a local level, a local authority or a school can look at previous attainment and can see if there's outliers and ask teachers to verify that they are content with their original decisions. It is the teacher's judgment based on demonstrated attainment that should set the mark, the grade for this young person as we go through this process. So there is no place in this model for local authorities to instruct a teacher, because the whole point of the ACM is that it's based on demonstrated attainment and the teacher's judgment of that demonstrated attainment. If there are any examples of that coming forward, or even if there's any concerns from teachers that that's what's happening, then I absolutely would want to hear about that, because that's not how the model is designed to work. That's not what we all agreed in the NQ21 group of how the model would work. So I would take that very seriously if there's anything like that going on, because it's not how the model is designed to work.
Thank you, Cabinet Minister. I'll have two final questions. I will read them both to you just now, but they are quite different subject matters, unlike the ones I put together there, but I'll give you them both. So the first one here is from Andrew Fullwood, and it's on the issue of pay. So, will you act quickly to ensure that teachers can receive their overdue pay rise before the end of term? A pay rise that ensures our pay is restorative and does not further erode our standard of living, and reflects the efforts made by us as professionals to maintain education throughout the pandemic. And the last question here is on ASL, and it's from Catherine Brown. The Morgan report, while aspirational, does not speak to the day-to-day difficulties and in most cases extreme challenges of the ASL sector that they face across the country today. There's no additional consideration given to ASL establishments in terms of facilities, environment or training. Our role is to provide a bespoke school experience for our children and young people, but we're not given a bespoke package of support from our local authorities. So how can we meet the needs of all of our pupils without adequate resource?
Okay, thanks for those questions as well. On pay, as I said during my remarks, I absolutely understand and can fully appreciate that there's frustration on where we're at with pay at the moment and the delay in that. Obviously, the Scottish Government is not the only player in this, but I certainly want to see progress with it. I know there's a degree of frustration perhaps around how COSLA is moving forward with their approach to a kind of one workforce approach to this, rather than perhaps looking at what's happening at teachers in particular. And I think that is unfortunate, given the fact that we have a negotiating position set up to look at and recognise specifically the roles, the challenges and the opportunities of the teaching profession. So exactly what, I think it was Andrew that raised the question, exactly the point of recognising the challenges of that workforce, although I do appreciate other workforces have faced challenges over the pandemic as well. We want to see that resolved as soon as possible. I think, to be fair, trying to get it resolved before summer holidays would be rather optimistic, if I can put it like that, but it is something we're determined to move forward because this has gone on for too long. When it comes to ASL, this is an area where I think as a society and as a government, we know we need to move forward. And it is something I would hope to be able to work with local authorities on, because there's parts of this that's responsibility for government, there's parts of this that's responsibilities for local authorities. There's a variability that we have within pupil outcomes across the country, whether it's for ASL or for the wider school population, and I'm keen to kind of tease into that about the reasons behind that. Now, yes, you can argue some of that is absolutely to do with resources, but I don't believe it's the only reason why we have variability sometimes amongst pupil outcomes. And I want to be able to get into a discussion with local authorities and with others why we have that variability and what can be done to avoid that. As part of that conversation, teachers are going to be absolutely critical, because whether it's through an individual's personal experience or whether it's absolutely through the power and of a union, you will be able to have your own views and your own evidence about why that might be happening. And I think that's a crucial aspect that we're going to have to move forward with very, very quickly, is looking at that variability and challenging ourselves at all levels of decision making in this, why these happen.